Welcome back. House Republicans are considering a list of potential spending cuts to pay for President Trump's top priorities. Politico is reporting that lawmakers are looking to cuts to the federal food program SNAP, which would save an estimated $22 billion. The Cato Institute says reforming SNAP could save up to $190 billion in the next 10 years. New York Democrat Tom Suozzi told Fox News he's open to working with Republicans on the Trump agenda. Watch.
In my district, President Trump won by 19,000 votes. I won by 11,000 votes, which means 20,000 people had to have voted for Donald Trump and Tom Suozzi together. They want us to work. I don't think it was a mandate for one-party rule, but it's a mandate to address the border, address the economy, address inflation. There's going to be a big fight in the Republican Party over this tax bill. The only way we're going to get something done, I think, is either they can do my way or the highway and they get it done, or we work together across party lines to try and find common ground.
Joining me now is Arkansas Congressman French Hill. He is the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee and a member of the House Intelligence Committee. Mr. Chairman, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
You bet, Maria. Great to be with you.
Let's talk about how you're structuring things and where tax extensions come. I know there was a whole discussion about the SALT deduction over the weekend. What role will your committee play in implementing the agenda?
Well, first, I think President Trump's doing absolutely the right idea, which is meeting with Republican senators, Republican House members, and determining what the best way to find the spending cuts that we want to offset his agenda of rebuilding our military, accomplishing energy independence and future permitting reform, securing our border, and extending the pro-growth features of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And that's what these listening sessions have been all about. And there are many more weeks of that listening before we get to that final point when we accomplish two things. First, and unfortunately, finish FY25 spending. In my view, that would have been best to have been done in the last Congress, but we have to do that before March 13th and deal with the wildfire costs associated with the California disaster in the Los Angeles basin, and then accomplish this reconciliation effort to accomplish the president's mission sometime by the April timeframe. So we're going to be busy.
Yeah, it's a great point on the aid for California. We've been talking a lot about this. The agenda is sort of colliding with this emergency. House
Right.
Speaker Mike Johnson said that he's open to putting conditions on the aid for the California wildfires in the latest reconciliation bill. Watch this.
I think we've got to have a serious conversation about that. Obviously, there's been water resource mismanagement, forest management mistakes, all sorts of problems. And it does come down to leadership, and it appears to us that state and local leaders were derelict in their duty in many respects. So that's something that has to be factored in.
So, Congressman, I know there's been discussion about tying the debt limit increase to the disaster aid as well. Congress's short-term funding bill last month providing $100 billion in aid and $29 billion for FEMA's disaster relief fund, and now you've got to go at it again. But the policy decisions in California have been talked about quite a bit, and I'm wondering if you want to put some conditions there in terms of putting aid to California. Here's Devin Nunes with me Sunday talking about what went wrong in California with regard to policy. Listen.
But it's pretty simple. It's water, it's grazing, it's logging. Those industries have all been hampered. If you look at agriculture, we're down in land that's being farmed because of lack of water. This means when farms don't get water, guess what? The LA Basin also doesn't get water. So as you're building out and adding people and adding homes in the Los Angeles Basin, if you don't have an adequate, abundant water supply and you're rationing water, the people that are building those homes, the city planners, they're not putting in green areas, they're not building fire breaks. If you run the farmers and ranchers out of the state of California, guess what? You don't have the animals to sit there and graze. So a combination of the proper land management would solve all of this problem. Now, what's going to happen? They're going to, just like they've done for the last 20 years, California's going to run to the federal government, and they're going to ask for money. And I think this time, hopefully, I think President Trump and the Republicans in Congress will say, look, we're just not going to keep doing the same thing again. So California's going to need a lot of money.
Congressman, what do you think?
Well, look, I think Devin Nunes is right on land management practices, and the Republicans in the House, led by Bruce Westerman of Arkansas, have led the way in the right kind of land management and water resource management practices through the Natural Resources Committee. We just passed his Resilient Forest Initiative just before the end of the year. Those kind of practices would have met the standard that Devin Nunes outlined if they'd been implemented by the state of California. But there's more to the story, which is state and local government zoning. And in my view, they're allowing people to build and create density in areas that are wild and have no business having, improved structures in them without complete local fire mitigation. He mentioned fire breaks in his comments, but that is an understatement when you have to have both fire breaks between the wild area and the urban area and remove the brush that's built up during wet periods out in California. And that's where the grazing comes in and the use of animal livestock. So this all works together. I would be for conditions if people can find ways to attach federal conditions to that aid. California has to fix its really poor land management practices that have produced so much damage.
And this was all related to the climate change agenda. You know, they didn't want the timber industry to come in and log and cut down trees. So it does have to do with that ideology of the climate change agenda. Also on financial services, bank capital, another issue. I know the FDIC Vice Chair Hill outlined potential Basel III endgame changes. What do you want to see, sir, in terms of deregulation and changes in capital with regard to financial services companies from your role overseeing that oversight?
Well, first, we want to make community banks great again. We want to think that public and private, small, medium-sized, and regional banks can have the tailored regulations that allow them to be competitive with the great, large, international, globally systemic banks. That's a key point. So tailoring of regulations is important. The Biden-Harris administration abandoned that practice. Secondly, on the capital rules, I would recommend, and I believe my colleague in the Senate, Tim Scott, agrees with me, that we should ask the Trump administration to withdraw the Basel III endgame capital rule and essentially repropose the whole thing with an eye towards being capital neutral, pro-growth, and get our system back functioning in a much better way. Our committee is the Access to Capital Committee. And the Biden-Harris administration, in my judgment, was impeding access to capital.
Yeah, great points all around. Do you think you're going to have at least one bill signed into law by the end of the first 100 days, whether it's budget, energy, defense, or budget, energy, defense, and taxes?
Boy, I'd be so much more optimistic about that if we didn't also have to deal with this FY25 spending hangover from the last Congress. But look, we're going to work nonstop 7 days a week with President Trump to implement his agenda between now and the 4th of July. And I hope we have a lot of accomplishments in that period.
So you're not sure if you're going to be able to get even one big, beautiful bill then?
Well, I think we can. Look, President Trump and Speaker Johnson have set a goal of voting on reconciliation by early April.
Right.
And I believe that we can do that.
Okay.
And I believe we can get spending done. But I thought you were referring maybe to something besides reconciliation. I think we're going to put all of our work. Right. Well, I think that'll be included in this budget discussion, the supplemental appropriation discussion, or the reconciliation bill. I think that's the best way to handle it.
Congressman, we know you have a lot of work to do. We appreciate your time this morning. Thank you, sir.
You bet. Thanks.
All right.
Appreciate
Congressman
you,
French Hill this morning in D.C.